All right, welcome listeners to the first episode of the Schoolhouse Scuttlebutt. I'm your host, Mr. D. I'm joined by a special guest today. We're going to kind of get into the ins and outs of using technology in today's classroom. So for myself, this is our first podcast. I teach fourth grade here in our local school systems. I've been a teacher for about 6 years and still growing. I have a special guest today. I'm going to let her introduce herself.
My name is Sandra Hooker. I have been in education for 12 years now, and I have taught in high school as well as I'm in secondary education now in the nursing program at Northeast State.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you joining us today. We're just really going to hit the ground running today. Our topic, big focus is technology in today's classroom. With so many different advancements in the world today, technology has really changed the entire landscape of education, not only in the past 20, 30 years, but here just in the last 2 to 3 years. Technology is a big part of education, the way teachers use instruction and go with their curriculum. So I'm more so in the elementary field, but speaking with you who teaches secondary with the college education. So the answers I'm looking forward to, they're going to be really different compared to my own thought process, but definitely looking forward to getting into it. So right off the bat, with you, how was technology incorporated in the classroom when you first began teaching?
12 years ago, when I started teaching in the classroom at the local high school, we used Apple TVs and iPads. So I liked the advantage of having some technology in the classroom, not just your basic projectors and that type of thing that I was used to years ago. So the iPad, we were able to mirror our lessons over to the television where the students could see it. That came with being able to not be stuck at a desktop computer. We were able to walk around the room while we taught our lessons and that kind of thing. The only thing, it did come with a few disadvantages as well, and we'll get into that in a minute. But some of the big advantages to having technology in the classroom then was the ability to be mobile in the classroom, and also to pull up educational videos as you were lecturing or teaching your lesson.
Awesome. Yeah, we've come a long way I remember back as a student myself, very long ago, from our teachers standing behind overhead projectors, using dry erase markers and clear film in order to get notes to the children. If we had a video that needed to be shared, it was always VHS time. A cart had to be rolled in. So with today's technology, I mean, it's definitely changed the game. It's been meant to kind of lighten the workload on teachers and students. But like you said, there are at times where we have a few disadvantages. So great answer. Looking at the classroom today, with all the recent advancements in technology, how do you utilize technology in your own classroom? Like, what are some examples? And with that, like, what are some of the benefits of utilizing it in your own classroom?
Being in secondary education is different than being in the high school setting, but it has its very similar parts as well when technology is concerned. I use a smart TV now, and I use a computer, which is a desktop, and we display PowerPoints, while conducting lecture. Our TVs are great because I'm still not tied down to that computer at the desk. The televisions we have now, if I'm ready to switch a slide, I just swipe across with my finger, and that allows me to move that slide forward. Also, if I'm trying to convey a topic or something that I'm trying to convey to the student, that I can do that with a visual aid, I can draw on that. So we use our smart televisions. We draw with our finger just like we replaced our whiteboards. So we no longer use our whiteboards for that. We can use you can provide visual representation of a concept that way by drawing on it. We also utilize an enhanced version of the student's ebook, and that allows students to use a highlighting feature. They have their own electronic devices, and so while they're listening to lecture, they can highlight certain aspects, or they have their PowerPoints pulled up and they can, make notes, highlight, that kind of thing. The enhanced ebook also allows students to care for patients in a virtual environment. Being in nursing, we take students into, of course, the hospital in their clinical setting, but before we get there, we can have them do what they call a VSIM, and is a virtual patient. And based on their critical thinking and based on their answers to the question is the outcome of that patient. So they can possibly kill their patient, or they can, have them have a good outcome. So in that respect, technology's come a long way in allowing students to develop those critical thinking skills, in a safe, controlled environment. It improves their critical thinking skills. We also recently have purchased he's called SimMan. He's a very, very high-tech piece of equipment that we use in our labs. He does all the things. He has the capability of speech. He can talk. He sweats. He can change heart rhythms, blood pressures, etc. He is equipped with heart and lung sounds for students to listen to. They get familiar with the different sounds of the heart and the different sounds in the lungs before going into the hospital setting. And I think that's very beneficial. We also run mock codes, which would be a life-saving code blue situation with students in the lab. And I'm able to watch their effectiveness of their compressions that they're giving, the breaths they're giving. I can watch that on the computer screen, and it gives me, I can give them immediate feedback on that. This allows students to experience what would be a very stressful situation in the real life. We can do that in the controlled environment while improving their critical thinking. We also test via computers, and this allows students to become comfortable with computerized testing before they have to go take their state boards, which are computerized.
Nice. I mean, that's an insane answer because, like you said, you're incorporating that technology to give these students a real-world situation, a real-world scenario. Because, I mean, as we all know, nursing is a very important field. You've got to be very specific with your skills. Being able to practice that with an opportunity, not necessarily a low-stress environment, but kind of like a stage-building environment to, eventually you'll get to that position where, hey, my training's kicking in, and now it's time to roll. So, like you hit on a few things, like kind of eliminating the need for dry erase boards using technology. The mobility of the instructor being able to get up, they're no longer kind of stuck behind that desktop having to read off the screen, teach your lessons from there. So just the inclusion, being able to get up, work with your students hand in hand, simulations. I mean, that's a big difference from what I see, like as far as with my grade level, because, we don't have that kind of technology. I mean, that is insane. A simulation where the individual sweats, he responds to medical reactions, medical decisions. So technology it's just come such a long way. And it's awesome that not only do we have those tools to use, a lot of these schools are finally getting the funding they need in order to purchase those types of tools. So awesome, very, very in-depth answer. So with that, how do you ensure that technology enhances your teaching rather than becoming a distraction? What is the big thing there?
Keeping students engaged is a challenge. I don't care if you are in teaching elementary, middle school, high school, or secondary. Keeping a student engaged and interested is always a challenge. Using technology, in my classroom, if used properly, helps to keep the students engaged. Being able to follow along and highlight in their ebook, I think helps keep students engaged in what you're doing. There's a thing that I do. You never know if a student has their electronic device. You never know if they're following along, if they're shopping, or if they're scrolling the internet or on Facebook on their electronic device. You don't know that. Their computer screens are away from you. You don't know what they're doing. So typically what I'll do to make sure it's not what's the word I'm looking for?
Like,
It's what I, not a distraction. That's the word I'm looking for. Is I will interject midway through, partially through a lecture, a case study. And we will sometimes use Kahoots, and they have to answer. I read the scenario of the case study. They have to answer questions. They have to interpret labs or interpret the disease process, and they have to answer questions on Kahoots, or I just call on them. And I think that draws them back in.
I like how you mentioned that, the interjecting, like instead of saying like, hey, put that away, or I know you're not paying attention, you kind of hit them like without interrupting your whole teaching process, and you kind of see, hey, are you following along? Because in elementary school, they are not so much having their phones and stuff on them during class. At least they should not be, as much as they do in middle and high school. But in elementary school, if I notice, it's very similar, whether it's technology involved or not. When a student is not engaged, they're just not. So you've got to kind of find those tools that are going to be useful for you and them. That's also not going to slow down the entire learning environment for your students. So like I said, interjecting, bringing up a Kahoot. It's very familiar with, or very similar to what we do in the class. I'll raise a hand. Has anybody got any questions? Or if we're going through a text or maybe a math problem, instead of taking my friends who raise their hand all the time, I'll look and see who I believe may not be following along at the time, and I'll kind of call on them to guide us through. Not necessarily throwing them to the wolves, because more than likely, if I called on them, I kind of identified that they were not paying attention. So I don't want to embarrass them on top of them not paying attention and falling behind. So I want to kind of get them to guide us as a class. And so, like I said, interjecting, that's a big thing. Talking about that, technology in the classroom, with technology being in the classroom, it was meant to prepare students for the future and also to help ease the workload of teachers. What are some of the challenges that you as an educator have faced when using technology in the classroom, and how were you able to overcome those challenges?
Well, as I said earlier, teaching in the high school, we used the iPads with Apple televisions, the Apple TV. And there was a problem that I had with students. These high school students were pretty technologically savvy. And on many occasions, not just once, I had students hack into my Apple TV with random videos. So that was a distraction and could happen at any time. And that caused stress in the classroom because I never knew when it was going to happen. It actually happened during an evaluation day. And so that was, upsetting and caused some tension. The only thing I could do was change my password. I changed my password multiple times, and I still, the students, I have no idea how they were able to do that and to hack into my Apple TV and just throw up random videos in the middle of my class. But it happened. And so sometimes it got to the point at the end that I was changing my password daily to keep that from happening. At the college level, there's still some challenges. Like I said before, each student has their own electronic device during lecture, and it's very difficult to know what they're actually doing on those electronic devices. So basically just interjecting at the appropriate times when I see that I'm losing my class, or they may be doing something else, or I see them even with their phones. Now, you talked about phones earlier. In the secondary education realm, phones are a necessity because we have a lot of adult students, and we can't take their phones away from them because they may have a child at home, or they may have, they may need that. But at times we do find that students will text one another in class, and we see a lot of snickering and, that kind of thing going on. And so it's just like children, you have to pull them back in sometimes. And so sometimes that can be a challenge and a distraction.
No, very good. Like you said, I definitely agree with you. Talking about making sure that it's not a distraction. The biggest thing for me is just kind of being older than the group that I teach. They're 9 and 10-year-olds. So they're very limited in some things they can do. But, a lot of these kids, they had an iPad in hand before their first birthday. So it's just something that they've grown up with, and we're going to continue seeing that. So it has been a distraction at times for me during the class. Like I said, very rarely with my grade level will students pull out an electronic device like a cell phone or a smartwatch, but it can occur. the way that I overcome it is where I'm not exactly the most fluent person with technology. Excuse me. I use it to my advantage. When something doesn't appear to be working fluently with a smartboard presentation, I choose one of these little tech savvy students. I'm like, hey, go up there, adjust this for us so we can get on with the lesson. So I take their mischievous behaviors that I see on occasion, and I use it to the benefit of the class to kind of help us keep the lesson rolling along. So in talking with that, there's so much technology. There's so many different students that we come across from many different walks of life. One of the more important questions that I have for you, and I like to talk about this with a lot of people that I work with in education. What are some of the strategies that you use to support your students who may have that limited access in technology outside of the classroom? We all don't come from the same walk of life. Not everybody has an iPhone or an iPad or a MacBook. So for those students who don't have those full technological capabilities outside of your classroom, how do you go about in supporting them?
You're right. That does happen. And it does happen at the college level. We have a lot of students who are coming back to school or starting for the first time, and they do have limited resources. So as far as computers go, we do have computer labs that are open computer labs throughout the day that students can come and do work on if they need to. Also, we provide all the laptops and desktops for exam purposes, so they're more secure that way too. We do that. Also, the college has a program where if a student doesn't have the means to purchase their own laptop, can borrow a laptop each semester. They have to bring it back each semester, but they can borrow it. However, the student has to meet certain criteria for the program, so there are some limitations with that. I would like to see that in our college be open a little bit more. I think we need that to be open just a little bit more. I understand computers and laptops are expensive, but I also feel like it shouldn't be so tight. So we're working on that at the college level to get more access to those students who are maybe at a disadvantage of having those funds.
I completely understand. Like when COVID happened, it really opened the eyes of the education world. We went from in-class instruction to virtual instruction. So you really, unfortunately for a lot of you, really find out what your students are really going through when you see them outside the classroom. Like I said, they're not going to all wake up Christmas morning with a brand new iPhone. So just because a student doesn't have that type or doesn't have that in their life doesn't mean that they deserve any less of an education. So like you said, devices from the schools being rented out, that's definitely a game changer. And it's very similar to what we do with education or with elementary kids, middle school kids, and high school kids. We've hit a lot of notes today with technology in the classroom, and I kind of like to finish it up with just a very broad question. In your opinion, with everything that's changed over the past few years in education with technology, in your wildest dreams, where do you see the classroom 10 years from now?
In my wildest dreams, what would I like to see in the classroom?
We'll take that.
Okay, what I would like to see in the classroom is a hologram. Would that not be the best way to teach?
Hologram. I kind of like that.
I love it. I can imagine that has, in my world with, the medical world, having a hologram of a body or a part or a system would be fantastic and able to use a hologram type technology in the classroom and in the lab.
I like it. Hologram, especially for the nursing field, that'd be right up top. Now, for my field, if I had a hologram, it would just be simply because I love snow days without the snow, and the Mr. D hologram could teach his kids while I don't have to get up and get ready. So with that, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you joining us for the podcast. Like I said, it's the very first podcast of the Schoolhouse Scuttlebutt. We look forward to the next few episodes, and as always, we appreciate the time. Miss Sandra Hooker, thank you for joining us, and we wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you.